Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers, and we're in the bye week. Hey Keith.
Yeah, bye week, coming off a win, an important win against a really bad team. It's an important win because had they lost to the really bad team, it would have been a signal that it's time to start trading vet players. And they won, so we ended up not doing that, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, it was the Jacksonville Jaguars. They definitely are a bottom 5 team in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. They just have a serious talent deficit on that team and some questionable coaching and so forth. So the Seahawks took care of business. So that's the good part about the game for me, was that they took care of what they needed to take care of decisively. It wasn't like we were inching along and squeaking this out and, pulled away at the end or whatever. This was methodically taking care of business all the way through. Before they scored at all, we were up 24-0. There just wasn't any question in this game. Yeah. So 31-7 was the final. The last 7 points from the Jaguars came in the final couple minutes after the game was completely out of.
Yeah, it's completely garbage time. Right around the 2-minute warning when they, or just after the 2-minute warning when they scored, and then they tried an onside kick for reasons that make no sense because you're not coming back from that far down. And Travis Homer fielded the onside kick, and instead of going down, he decided to run and ran it all the way in for a touchdown because they weren't ready for him to do anything other than fall down.
Yeah, that was glorious.
It was just. What a special teams gaffe by the Jaguars. Like, you can't allow that to happen. And that was the end. The game had ended well before then, but at that point you were like, okay, any hope? You're already like less than 1% win percentage, and that just made it,
Oh, you
zero.
Need less than 1. Yeah, I'm talking 99.999.
Yeah.
However many decibels that you can add, you just keep adding them. That was it. Okay. So before we kind of get into the show a little bit and some other topics, let's talk about the trade deadline, because that happened today. It came and went. Seattle stood pat. There was some speculation, some talk that Seattle might move a couple of players. The Seattle media mentioned 2 specifically in Rashad Penny and LJ Collier. And we kind of anticipated that too, just based on the fact that Penny hasn't been able to stay healthy for 3 years. And when he has been in, his impact is just diminished. I mean, he just does not look like a player that's able to help this team. And then LJ Collier is just a healthy scratch, can't get on the field. His position group at 5 Tech is really crowded, as you've mentioned in prior shows, and they just weren't able to get any deals that looked attractive to them to move those players. And I would imagine even the deals that were on the table were just chicken scratch at this point for those guys. I would imagine they probably didn't get any offers for Penny. And if they got an offer for Collier, it was probably like a 2023 or 2024 conditional 7th round pick type of a thing where they just, we're going to keep him for injury insurance purposes for the rest of the year, and then we'll move on.
Well, Collier looked better last year. He was just awful as a rookie. He actually was a big contributor a year ago, and so we had more expectations for him than we've seen.
Yeah,
but they've gone out and brought in other players at his position, and Rasheem Green has gotten healthy. On top of that, and he just keeps getting pushed further down the depth chart to the point where the only chance he had to get actual snaps was at 3 Tech, moving inside to defensive tackle, and he simply isn't effective there. So that means you've got a guy who doesn't have the speed to rush the passer well from the defensive end spot, can't really play on the inside. There's not a ton of value in a run stuffing defensive end, which is what he is. and he is just down on the depth chart, so he's not getting any playing time. At this point, yeah, he's insurance in case they have a couple of injuries at the position. But other than that, I don't expect to see him much this year.
The other NFC West teams did make some moves, which was interesting. And each one of them were decent in their own way. The Rams, I think, had the biggest, splashiest move with the 2022 second and third round picks going to the Broncos for Von Miller.
I mean,
we've seen, Von Miller's had the most sacks in the NFL, I think, since 2011. Yep. And he's a great player, but when you've got him for half a year and he's got 4.5 sacks total so far in 8 games, you're looking at four or five sacks the rest of the way for a second and a third round pick. And that's it. He's a rental.
Well,
and
he is a rental, but he might be a guy that you get more out of than the 4 or 5 sacks, because you're now going to play him in the same pass rush as Aaron Donald and Floyd coming off the other side. And so there's a lot of pass rush there.
What do you think about that in the NFC West, I think
that was a great move.
Considering where the Rams are sitting.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great move in that you get a guy that's actually athletic enough to chase down Murray, the Arizona quarterback, and
Russell Wilson.
And it gives them a chance to be better defensively. Defensively, they haven't been that good this year. The offense has been better, but the defense has not been the same quality as it has been in the past, and this just makes up for a lot of that. It was a big price, though. A second and a third round pick. They already don't have a first round pick because of the Stafford trade. Their
draft is gone.
They also don't have a 6th or a 7th or a 4th. They have a 5th.
Their draft is gone. I mean, they leveraged the entire future for this year. They've literally put everything on the line.
They have one. They currently sit with 1 draft pick for this coming draft.
So, what do you think of that strategy? Like literally putting all the chips are in. They're all on the table, that you pushed them all in, and that's it.
I hate it because what happens is you're so susceptible to one injury just derailing this whole process. And then you've mortgaged your future.
But your future was fairly mortgaged anyway. And contract wise, their salary cap is kind of screwy, and they've got Stafford now playing really well. He's going to end up getting some epic contract now. That he probably wasn't going to have before. It was going to be league average, or slightly better, maybe making $30 million a year type of a thing. And now he's probably earned himself an additional $10 million a year. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I don't think they're going to be able to afford him.
They're a mess. They will, because they traded their entire future for him. Right. But who will they lose? And this was the problem going into this year, is that they already had to jettison some defensive talent in order to afford to bring Stafford over. Now they're not going to have first round picks for the next 3 years in order to account for that. They don't have any draft picks. They have 1 5th round pick in this next draft. And so they're going to have to find a way to reset and recharge, reload, whatever word you want to use, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They don't have the salary cap money to do it in free agency, and they don't have the draft picks. It's going to be.
So if Matthew Stafford and Von Miller are the difference for this team, and they win a Super Bowl, is it worth it?
Yes.
Well, I think that answers the question.
And that's the thing, is if those 2 moves get them a Super Bowl, absolutely it's worth it. Most teams would take, 10 years of 9 years of losing if you win a Super Bowl in the 10th year. And so, okay, fine, sure. It's better than, 10 years of barely making the playoffs, which has kind of been the Rams thing for a while now. But what happens if Aaron Donald gets hurt? Or what happens if Stafford? Or Von Miller, who's actually been fairly fragile the last couple of years, right? So you've traded away all this stuff.
Or Cooper Kupp.
To become an elite Super Bowl contender. but you're also one injury away from all of that effort being for nothing.
And that's the way it is in the NFL, Keith.
It's a huge risk.
It's a huge risk, but now you're talking about half a year. So now you've squeezed the entire year down into the remaining eight or nine games plus playoffs. And I think that is a decent risk for a team that's right on the cusp. And so coming out of the strongest, division in the NFC West, emerging as the best team possibly, you're competing now with the Cardinals for that. But I would argue the best team overall and best coach to get to the Super Bowl and in a year where the NFC in general is really competitive. And so it'll be interesting. It's an interesting role. And given the other factors that you talked about with the draft picks that were already gone anyway, the salary caps, the timing, it just seems like this would have been it. I mean, you either go all in or you just kind of stay put and you may not get there. And I'm not sure if Von Miller's the guy that puts them over the top. We'll see what kind of impact he has down the stretch. But if you say Aaron Donald on the inside is going to help him on the outside, I kind of believe that with Leonard Floyd on the other side, that all of a sudden becomes fairly formidable for teams, and their defense is already pretty decent. So Von
Miller is a truly elite player.
Has been.
And I think that you're looking at it.
Is he anything, Yeah. Is he anything more than like Carlos Dunlap on steroids right now? Well, a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, he's an elite
he's more of a pass rusher. Yeah.
He's a guy that in the past has had, I think he one year had 16.5 sacks and another year he had 15. I mean, he's that kind of guy. He's only got 4.5 this year, but part of that is the talent around him in Denver. They're just not as good there. And so teams are double and triple teaming Miller in order to keep him.
Yeah, I'm sure he's very happy. He's very happy. He doesn't have to go through a cold winter. So how about the Cardinals in Arizona? Adding Zach Ertz. This came before the trade deadline. This came about a week and a half ago, but I'm going to go ahead and count that deal anyway as a team that made an improvement on a midseason trade to add to their roster and give Murray another weapon.
Yeah. I mean, there's no complaint, if you're a Cardinal fan. I mean, it's a very good player. It's a position of need in that. So now you're going to have more, he's a mismatch. He creates all sorts of problems for defenses because of his athleticism and speed at the tight end spot. And so
not only a mismatch, but he gives Murray a way out of different situations. Murray likes to scramble and stuff, and when you do that, you tend to draw defenders to you. And when that happens, spaces open up, and Murray has proven that he can take advantage of that.
Yep. And so giving him a big target in the middle of the field, I mean, I think it was a good move for them. I think that it does improve an already potent offense, especially because, at the receiver position, Arizona's not as strong as the names on their roster suggest. Hopkins is still great, but AJ Green he's
lost a step, but he's still effective in what he does.
Yeah, but he used to be one of the top, 3 receivers in the league, and now he isn't. He's a possession guy, a short route, big body, type of receiver. It's a completely different kind of player.
Yeah, but I think it benefits
dynamic.
That offense, though, that run and shoot kind of thing that they've got going on there. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems to work for them. It seems to work. So, and then and the 49ers added defensive end Charles Omenihu from Houston. They gave a 2023 conditional 6th round pick, which is essentially nothing, for a rotational 5-tech defensive end for their defense. I thought was an okay move for them. 49ers aren't really going anywhere. So this was more of probably a project that they can develop, hold on to a player, see what they've got. Yeah. And see what happens next year.
He's a guy that is under contract for more than just this year. It isn't a rental. And so they gave up a draft pick. It's a low draft pick. It's a 6th rounder. If he plays a lot, they can move up to a 5th rounder.
Yeah. And not even in 2022.
Yeah. And so they gave up not much. in order to get a guy. And the truth is they've needed some help on the defensive line. They need rotational guys. They've got some good players, but they need the guys behind them. When their good players have to come off the field, the drop off in talent has been extraordinary. And so they're looking for rotational guys that can come in and make them better. My only problem with the move is that the 49ers aren't going anywhere. Why are you trading to make your team better now when you're going to be losing?
I don't think it's a move to make the team better now. I think it's exactly what you said. They're bringing a player in to evaluate and positioning themselves to have some depth this year and then see what happens.
Yeah, I mean they're a team that's going to be around 500. They're not going anywhere, and so trading away assets, you could have gotten that same player maybe without giving up the draft pick in the offseason, or a similar player. It's not like those players are hard to come by.
Well, and that kind of points to what Seattle's ultimately went with at the trade deadline, which was kind of staying pat. You know, the same record as San Francisco essentially, and they decided not to do anything, not to add or subtract from their roster, which to me was probably the most logical thing coming out of that win, the 31-7 win against the Jaguars. So if
they had lost to the Jaguars, I think we would have seen them trade away some stuff and
salary dump
next year. If they had beaten the Saints or the Saints and the Steelers along with the Jaguars, I think you would have seen them trade for a cornerback if there was one available. Tried to get some help.
Yeah,
maybe
I do too.
Linebacker.
I heard that well, it probably wouldn't have fit this defense because Fuller from the Broncos was available, but he's more of a slot guy. So I was going to ask you, what do you think of that? Like for the Seahawks, as far as how do you feel about that Saints game? Like how close we were, and it looks like the Saints are a good team this year. Like, does it make you feel any and the way that we lost to the Titans, for example? And now that you kind of know, we kind of know what those teams are now. And the Saints now just lost Winston for the season, but nonetheless, a good solid team. And we lost against what has proved to be one of the top, probably 5 defenses in the NFL against the Saints.
Well, and we did it without Russell Wilson. That's the other thing is you had Geno Smith in there.
That's what I mean. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think what it shows you is that the Seahawks are closer to what we thought they were coming into the year than what people are saying. Is that this is a better football team than their record suggests. I mean, they've had to play 3 games without their starting quarterback, and that's rough.
And they had to ease into whatever Shane Waldron was bringing in.
Yeah,
and it took them a while to figure that out.
And so we have, there's growing pains with that and whatever. But the defense also wasn't good, and we can go. Talk about how we kind of overestimated the talent on the production we were expecting out of the defense. But overall, it's still a good football team. They without their starting quarterback played the Saints, right up to a last second field goal.
The Seattle defense is improving. So the last 4 games were 10th in opponent passer rating, 3rd in third down conversion rate against us, 8th in opponent yards per play, and 5th in points allowed in the last 4 weeks. That's not, for a defense that was 31st before that last 4 weeks. That's a pretty significant improvement.
Yeah.
Now, granted, opponents are opponents. In the NFL, though, you got to play who's in front of you, and so I'm not going to take anything away from that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you look at who they played before that, and Jimmy Garoppolo and company is not scaring anyone. Neither is Ryan Tannehill
and all that stuff.
I mean, it's not like they were playing, the top quarterbacks in the league, and now
we are in the next 2 weeks.
And then now we're playing, and then they went to playing a bunch of backups and whatever. Like they were playing, okay-ish quarterbacks the whole time, and they went from giving up tons of yards to not giving up many. And so it has been a significant improvement. And what we've seen is them using like Jamal Adams in a way that makes way more sense. And they've made some adjustments on at cornerback.
Yeah,
getting
and Ryan Neal coming in too. I think it's been
Ryan Neal's playing more, and that's been helpful. They've been getting Trey Brown a lot more snaps, and he has stepped up and done well. And so they've made some personnel adjustments that have helped.
Yes.
And so they are a better team. They're a better team than their record suggests. And I think that's where we're at, is that this is a team that, because of their record, you don't want to go all in and make a couple of big trades and give away, draft capital, because it's going to require
for marginal return.
Yeah, you're going to have to go. It's going to require a lot for them to get into the playoffs and really contend for anything. But at the same time, it's possible. With this team being pretty good and Russell Wilson getting healthy.
Yeah. Well, Russell Wilson's going to have to play hero ball for like 10 straight games.
Yeah.
Basically.
But yeah. Well, he's been doing it for 10 straight years, so I don't know what we're worried
exactly.
about.
Exactly. Well, the cool thing is that the defense held the Jaguars to 0 points for 58 minutes. I mean, that's significant. And they looked really good doing it. Now, granted, it's the Jaguars, but I'm going to not talk about the Jaguars that way, because you know what? It's the NFL. What I was looking for specifically, though, was individual performances, the defense as a whole, and so forth. There were just a lot of things to like in this team. The way that the game flowed, how they stopped opponents on or the Jaguars on third down
and fourth down,
and didn't let them really have any chance. Just choked them out, which was what you'd want to see in this game. Like, it could have been one of those games where they play down and they didn't. And so that to me is like the big takeaway.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you in this show is, did we learn anything about the Seahawks in this game?
I think we learned a lot about the character of the team, because if you really take a look at it, Keith, we came into this game like with no hope. I mean, you've got a whole bunch of the fan base that's selling off all the tickets. Tickets to this game were the cheapest they could be. There was a whole bunch of empty seats. You're seeing a lot of kind of people just kind of giving up, walking away. But the team itself is not there. So that to me was a big takeaway. The way that they came out and played, took care of business, was a big takeaway. The way that Geno Smith came in and had command of the offense and really just what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where I said, hey, this is Geno Smith's opportunity to play out of Russell Wilson's shadow and focus on what the defense or what the offense is designed to do, which is tempo, quick hits, hitting on the first or second reads, and that sort of thing. And that's what we saw in this game. As far as other takeaways from this game specifically, it's hard, because it is the Jaguars and you were expected to do this, and because you did it doesn't mean you should deserve extra praise. It's just one of those things.
I don't know if we've learned anything about the team other than, you want to mention the character part, but as far as like the play on the field part, because
you still have individual matchups in the NFL, and there's still good players on that Jaguars team.
They did what they were expected to do and nothing more. And I mean, the defense was great, but Jacksonville,
I think I'm pointing to the offense.
Especially the offensive line is bad.
Yeah, no, their offensive line was bad. Our defensive line was better, which is good. Okay, so we have something to look at there.
But
our
does
offensive
that mean
line
does that mean that
really
it translates
well
to the next game? Does anything we saw translate to the end of the next game? Because they were better than the worst offensive line.
I think what I talked
in the
about
NFL.
translates. I think what I talked about translates. Just the mindset of winning, of still being in it, of being competitive, of playing assignment football better. Translates. It can translate. Now, when you're talking about a completely wholesale 1 to 2 levels difference in talent between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field, I don't know what translates, to be completely honest with you. I think that's yet to be determined. I think, and you know that, I think it's yet to be determined on this game. I think this game is very telling about where they're at, where they've come from, how they played the Saints. I think how they played the Tennessee Titans earlier and the Rams all kind of comes to the front right here. You get Russell Wilson back. Maybe he's got 5 days of practice before this game, maybe. And we'll see. Because I think this is like the game of the year, because it's on the road against a tough opponent. You're still needing to win every game. Like every game is like a playoff game almost, which is Pete's thing. And he kind of gets teams ready for these sorts of things. So it wouldn't surprise me if they won this game. It wouldn't surprise me if they got killed in this game. I'm just really curious as to see which team shows up. Is it a team that's going to give the Packers everything they got and fight to the death at the final whistle, or is it a team that's going to get run over and the game's over before the third quarter ends? So that'll be telling.
My bigger point about this last game is I don't think we learned anything. Like I literally don't think we learned anything about Seattle. That they beat up on a really bad Jacksonville team. But I think we will learn. I think we will learn everything about Seattle over the next 2 weeks when they're playing probably the best two teams on their schedule. Maybe the Rams are in that too. But with the Packers and Arizona, those are like the best two teams on their schedule. They're the best
two teams on the schedule, and I don't even feel like we're ready, which is hard because Russell Wilson's not been with the team for a while. And the team is just starting to turn the corner. So when you have a team that's just starting to turn the corner, if somebody smashes you in the mouth, it might set you back.
Exactly.
Or you've risen up so much that you can overcome some of that early season stuff and you kind of rise over the top. I just don't know which we're going to see. I really
that's what I'm saying is I think we're going to learn everything about this year's team over the next 2 weeks, because if the Seahawks,
we have to, because what if they lose both? Then we'd be sitting at what, 3-7?
Yeah, you're sitting at a point where you have to win out in order to make a playoff spot, and there's that. But if they take one of these two and they play the other team tough, that means they are right in the same conversation as those two teams, which are the teams that people say are the class of the NFC. And if you
there's a whole list there's like 5 or 6 teams grouped right now with Seattle at 3-5, 4-4, and some of those guys we play still coming up. Others we've already played, like the 49ers once, but like the Vikings and so forth. So we're going to need a little bit of help along the way, but there's that grouping there to get that 7th spot in the playoffs. We're right there. We're only a game out, literally. At 3-5, we're literally one game out of that 7th spot. And we could be the best team of that bunch, not just by a little bit, but by a lot, given the fact of where the team's evolved. And then you add Russell Wilson. Yeah. Now the hard part, Keith, is these games would have been at the best Seahawks team in the last 2 or 3 years that could show up for a game. These games would be hard. Right? Agreed. So if we lose these two, is everything lost? It depends on how we played those games. But I'm not, it's going to be weird, but you could be sitting at 3-7 and still have hope that you could actually rise up and take care of business the rest of the way and still make it somehow. The bottom line though is, Keith, if we're 3-7 after 2 tough losses against 2 tough opponents, nobody's going to feel good about that. The season's basically going to be written off, even if they were to close out and win out. They would have momentum going into the playoffs, but nobody would expect them to actually do anything in the playoffs once they got there.
Yeah, because they would have lost to the playoff teams on their schedule.
Correct.
And so because the schedule does get easier in the second half of the season. So them going on a run is highly probable. But if you don't beat any of the good teams on your schedule during the regular season, then you made it by beating bad teams. And I don't know. You're right. There's going to be no expectation for that.
So Green Bay was able to go take a game from the Cardinals. So if we lost to Green Bay and beat the Cardinals at home, which seems like the more likely scenario, but maybe not. Maybe Green Bay's, thinks Seattle's having an off year. They kind of underestimate them a little bit. Seattle comes in and takes it, and then somehow sneaks out one against Arizona at home. And all of a sudden, people are starting to talk about Seattle as being a team that nobody wants to face. Because
at that point, Seattle will have clawed their way back to 5-5, having just beat the class of the NFC in the previous 2 weeks. Now they're in the driver's seat because they're looking at, they're looking at an easy schedule, making a run, getting to 10, 11 wins pretty easily, and being a team that no one wants to face in the playoffs. It's a very different thing depending on what happens in these next 2 games. But I'm just saying, if they play both these teams tough and get 1 win, it's a different than if they play these teams tough and don't win anything. Because if they can't beat one of the good teams in the NFC, they're not going to be ever viewed as a threat. But if you can beat one, play the other one tough, that means, okay, in terms of on-field ability, you're right there with the class of the NFC. And I think that is a scenario where they'll still be talked about favorably, but they have more work to do to get there between now and the end of the year as far as getting into the playoffs.
So we kind of skipped over a whole bunch of guys to talk about in this game. Metcalf had a great game. Tyler Lockett had a great game. Bobby Wagner had 14 touchdowns. Geno Smith.
He did not have 14 touchdowns.
14 tackles, sorry. You can't go without saying something about the way that Geno Smith played. 2024, 195 yards, a couple of touchdowns, 128 quarterback rating.
He also had a rushing touchdown.
And a rushing touchdown. Just overall, just a great performance from a backup quarterback is what you wanted to see in this game. And he delivered. It doesn't make up for the 3 tough losses and turnovers and so forth in the last 3 games. But, at least, I don't want to say we went 1-4 with Geno Smith without Russell Wilson, but that's what it was. But at least he had this added to his resume. It might have been the last time he takes a snap as a Seattle quarterback, but it may give him an opportunity to find a job somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, this was an opportunity for him to show that he can run an offense, that he can complete a high, level of passes, be really efficient, convert on third downs. I mean, he did what the team asked him to do. He also, didn't have a great yards per attempt because it was a lot of checkdowns and a lot of short completions and that kind of stuff. And it was also against a really bad team, but I mean, it is what it is. He played against the team in front of him. He played well. And it's too bad that he wasn't able to play that well the previous 2 weeks because they could have used it.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
Alex Collins only had 10 touches for 44 yards. It's 4.4 yards per carry, which
it seems like he should have had more because he did affect the game in a positive way.
Well, they gave 7 carries to Rashad Penny for 7 yards. He averaged 1 yard per carry.
You asked me what we learned out of this game. That's what we learned. Rashad Penny, after the ACL injury,
is not the same guy.
Yeah, he's going to have a hard time getting back into the NFL after this year.
Yeah,
which is tough. That's tough. All right, let's get out of here. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. Seahawksplaybook.com is your place to go for all of our shows and all the other content on there. And you can find us on YouTube and subscribe to that channel. That would be outstanding. And your favorite podcast apps, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, all that stuff. So until next time, go.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.